Hello class, my name is Rafael Rene Hinojosa, and I am simply going to do my fraud analysis case on India Saturday accounting fraud. Now, this accounting scandal is a case that involves untrue activities in auditing and corporate governance activities in convenient financial reports by auditors and the accountants. Now, the company founder and CEO had announced that in January 2009, the company falsified its accounts by amount adding up to over $1 billion in the past years, making it the biggest financial scandal in India history. The company chief finance officer, Vadalamini, sorry if I butcher the name, still really, resigned from his position initially due to the stinking financial fraud. The new CEO appointed for the company said that the company's financial situation was very bad at the time. This probably means that the company was to ascertain that it continued in its business. The ex-CEO and the brother, who happened to be the company's managing director, was also arrested by the government due to the massive fraud scandal. Now, the scandal was equivalent to over, I think, $1.4 billion. As we go into this, you'll see, once I go over some of the numbers and over this presentation. They also created a new board to make decisions on behalf of the company and to ensure that it was back on the business. The government did everything to ensure that the company was back on track. However, it did not offer it financial aid, and thus the company was not fully built out. Now, some of the background about this is its computer service business was leading force in the global IT in outsourcing market lens. Now, the company adopts the use of the term right sourcing during the late 1980s. It offers a full range of services related to IT, such as engineering solutions, systems and software development and management, enterprise business solutions, and infrastructure management. The company also takes part in the business processing outsourcing market, particularly via the subsidiary Nipuna, offering back office, technical and product support, customer care, accounting, finance, and other related services. Now, Sanoma Computer Services also provide a website management and development and e-commerce. Now, e-commerce, we all know the boom about e-commerce. An example of e-commerce here in the United States would be Amazon. Simple, right? This company, it also majors on the web-based financial customer relations and supply chain. Now, some of the outsourcing provided its networks of offices were also located in India. It also offers a spot and remote services and operations in about 15 development companies in the UK, US, Hungary, Singapore, Australia, United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, China, India. And the company had experience developing a network considered near offshore accounts. Now, the plan bridges the gap between the on-site and offshore segments. Therefore, Sanoma's Canada operations offer services to the markets in North America as well. Now, where this starts to come into play, as you can see, they're already pretty much worldwide. And the brother's name, the founder, the leading face of the company, his name is Ramalinger, Raju. I'm gonna call him Raju just for my pronunciation purposes, because I obviously can't pronounce him correctly. Anyhow, he's the brother in the leadership of the component, and he was also the CEO and co-founder of the company. Now, the company had posted revenues worth $1.09 billion in 2006. Now, Raju emerged from agricultural rich family existence in Hyderabad, India. The family came from a minute village where Raju's grandfather was a farmer, so it comes from a very humbling background. So let's go ahead and click to the next slide here. And the introduction, and I just went a little bit over the some of the background and some of the history about the company. And so Sanoma Computer Services was a leading force in the global IT and the outsourcing marketing lens. accounting scandal and case that involves fraudulent activities in auditing and corporate governance. The company falsified its accounts, $1.09 billion in 2006, the biggest financial scandal in Indian history, and the ex-CEO and the company's managing director was arrested by the government due to the massive financial scandal. The government intervened to ensure the successful revamping of the company, yet this was not successfully custard. Now the background of the case is Raju, who emerged from a family of agriculture existing in India, as I explained earlier. And in the 1970s, the family wealth enabled Raju to the U.S. and its where he attended and got his MBA. He noticed computer technology would create a high demand for specialized types of services, so he joined his brother Ramu in establishing the company in 1987. By the end of the year, the 1980s, Satima was working on refining and developing the new model of the business. So soon the company became robust without any pressure on profits. And some of the company background, as you'll see, had sound financial security, which enabled to get involved in the risk, thus launching the first IT outsourcing company in India. You see, it also got its first client, John Decree, in 1991 to meet an ever-growing demand. The company heavily invested in building the network's international development centers, Myers and Earp. The first job was a success, making Satima the initial company to establish a 64 kbps satellite link. That's pretty intense there, considering that was in the 90s. It then became a public company in 1992. Satima then launched several subsidiaries worldwide. Now, the fraud scheme is probably the best part, I would think, in all my studying this case and looking over everything and making sure everything was proper and writing out this report. Raju wrote a letter explaining that Satima was in the practice of misrepresenting the accounting figures for several years. He confessed to having overstated the balance sheet by about $1.47 billion. About $1.04 billion that the company had stated was non-existent. It failed to report all the liabilities in the balance sheet. Okay, income for every quarter was overstated. Mr. Raju fabricated several statements from the bank to cover this fraud, and the income account was exaggerated to claim interest income from the counterfeit bank accounts. And a little bit more about the fraud scheme is he also confessed to having created approximately 6,000 board salary accounts during the previous years. He then would appropriate the cash amounts after the money was deposited in the accounts. And Satima falsified its audit reports and had fictitious customer identities. It generated fake invoices to help inflate the revenues. Then the internal audit head also used fake board resolutions as well. Right now, some of the reasons for the fraud was the following are the reasons that continued for the fraud. His greed for money, Raju's greed for money, stiff competition. Of course, during the 90s was the computer boom and the need for supremacy in India, the urge to impress the stakeholders, a high level of money circulation in the company, promoters taking the lead and controlling some percentages of the shares, and continued practice of fudging figures every year. Now, the fraud can be analyzed via the use of the fraud shining of the pressure, which is the incentive to carry out the fraud, and the opportunity and the rationalization. Now, the pressure is the company had pressure to meet the high sales revenues, of which it was falsifying in line with the goals of the company. Major incentives was to inflate the balance sheet and to make the goals of the sales that he had put in place with the investors. Sadama inflated its sales margins and the profit margins to appeal of the credit side of the investors, stakeholders, and customers. Sorry, I need a little bit of water. Throat's getting a little dry. Rationalization number 2 is a means of justification for performing the fraudulent act. He justified his actions by claiming that he wanted more money inflow into the company. He also mentioned the stiff competition in the industry for the reason to compete effectively, create an ideal financial position that would enable him to ward off his various competitors. The company needed to attract more investors and make the business look more reliable and stable, and the fraud also done as a result of the power and prestige with what it had done, and the opportunity that was available in this particular case with the company was Raju was in a prime position and had powers to inflate the company's financials, and PwC signed most of Santa's PwC, one of the big 4 accounting firms, signed most of the financial statements, and this was partly answerable, or was partly, for the fraud, be held accountable for the fraud. And so some of the signals and dictation is they claim to have deposited over 1.04 billion in his balance sheet, was based on deposits that did not accumulate any interest. Ethically, this money was to be transferred to an interest accumulative account or deposited back into the shareholders account. Sadama also made payments to PwC double what other firms would normally quote. This was a bribe. PwC did audits for the company for 9 years and never discovered the scandal. Merrill Lynch identified the scum in 10 days. Or, I'm sorry, it's not scum, it's scam. Sorry, a little typo there. UNA. But it's scam in 10 days. Merrill Lynch did. And this shows that either the auditors colluded with the company or they were just inept. And the conclusion is the company experienced fraud perpetrated by Raju. The major driving force behind the committing the act was overconfidence, which led to crossing the line and committing on this fraud. Now, the greed for money and the competition, the power, prestige, forced Mr. Raju to indulge himself in fraudulent activities. The CEO of the computers company, plus other individuals involved in all procedures, were responsible for allowing the fraud. All companies should adapt only qualified auditors, and they have to be monitored to avoid mistakes in the company and possible fraud. Now, Mr. Raju committed several crimes during his tenure that impacted negatively on the company's general reputation. Ultimately, the fraud had to come to an end, and the implications had dire consequences. And those are my references. Thank you very much. And again, Rafael Hinojosa, it's been a pleasure. Advanced Forensic Accounting. And I'm finally done with my master's. Thank you.